doing this year, welcome. What you should be doing this year in preparation for senior year application season. So this is the year that's all about you and what you want to think about and plan for next year. So if we can go to the next slide. So it's a long, grueling process, trying to decide where you want to go to school, what you might want to study. You can be overwhelmed and feel like it's just too much. So intimidating, stressful, daunting, scary, all these things. But if you start now and take it one step at a time, before you know it, you're going to have a solid list of schools that you're interested in. You'll have a better understanding of what you might want to be studying. And it will be, you'll be well prepared for the application season. So don't let it get you overwhelmed. We're going to have lots of opportunities to talk. Tonight is just the first step. I meet with all the juniors in the spring, and then in June, we'll have our first Rising Senior meeting where I will tell you what I would like you to do over the summer. But right now, we're going to talk about the here and now and what you should be doing as you proceed through your junior year. Next slide, please. Okay. So as with anything that you've undertaken to get to this point in your high school career, you have to utilize your time as best that you can. So if you wait to the last minute, you're just like when you have a big exam. If you wait to the last minute to study, you're going to be overwhelmed and not do as well as you could if you prepared along the way. So I want you to always remember to breathe. When we get anxious, we tend to not do that. We kind of hyperventilate, and then it's hard to think clearly, and the nerves get, at the high tilt. So it's really important to keep yourself in check as you go through the year. And if you have questions along the way, come the springtime, you have my full attention. I'm finishing up with the seniors now, and then come January through your fall of your senior year, you have my full attention. So do not hesitate if you have a question. So by September of 25, it's going to be really a great idea for you to have come up with a list of at least 10 to 12 schools that you are seriously considering applying to. And please, please, please keep in mind that there are 4,000 schools in this country. And if you want to study outside of the country, there are exponentially more. So you don't have to just look at like the top 10 schools that roll off your tongue. There are many wonderful schools. Keep your mind open. Great opportunities to be had in many, many different institutions. So by September, it would be great to have that solid list. Next slide, please. Okay. So in thinking about college in general, there are 5 basic elements to an application. A lot of times students will think, it's my grades, it's my SAT score, and those are going to be the things that get me into the school of my dreams. And, it's very competitive. So it's more than that. And sometimes if you have extraordinary extracurriculars and you are a wonderful writer and have done extraordinary things, the GPA can even be, somewhat secondary. It's never going to not have a place, but it might not be as important as some of these other things. And the standardized test scores is a similar scenario, that if you don't have a high GPA and you have an extraordinary SAT score or ACT score, it just indicates to the school that there's ability there, but it maybe hasn't been reflected in the grades. But if there's nothing else, if they're not extracurriculars and there are not, these wonderful essays and supplements, then it won't be enough. It's never going to be a standalone. All these things work in conjunction to one another. and it paints a picture of who you are. So your grades matter, the rigor of your courses. Students that are considering engineering or want to go into medical school and things like that, heavy on the math and science, that's what they look for. They want to know that you've taken the most rigorous courses that pertain to your future career, that was offered at our school. So we happen to offer, as you know, lots of things. So all that is part of the consideration of the schools, not just the GPA. So we don't weight our grades. So there's no way for us to really distinguish from a normal science class, for example, or an AP. They're graded in the same kind of a manner. However, our school profile indicates that everything is taught at the honors level at a minimum, and then AP is a step up from there. We have dual enrollment and College Now and things like that. So all that the colleges know about our school, and they look to see if you took advantage of those opportunities that we offer to you. So all those kind of things are important. And the extracurricular activities can be, a wide variety of things. They don't have to be a particular activity. For some people, it's sports. People belong to teams, and that's how they utilize their extra time. Other people get involved with SERP, and that's how they use their time. Clubs, bands, anything that you do. If you do, community service, and it's an ongoing kind of a commitment that you have, something that's really important to you, robotics. I mean, we offer lots of opportunities to get involved in extracurricular activities. So it's not the number of activities particularly, but it is the degree of commitments. So if you have been involved in 10 or 15 different activities, say, over the course of high school, but none for more than, a year, a few months, it's not really extraordinary. And it's not something that the colleges will say, oh, that's great. They'll wonder why, perhaps, you kind of jumped around, and they look for, well, where's the commitment beyond the school day? So, just keep that in mind. So you're choosing how you're using your time, which is very precious. And you'll hear me say this over and over again, that once we waste our time, we never get it back. So it's really important to be mindful how you're utilizing your time. And extracurricular activities are important, but should be chosen wisely. Do things that you're interested in, that are important to you, and not that you just think somebody else will think it's a great idea. Make sure it's something that you're really passionate about, because that will come through, and it will kind of influence the way that you conduct yourself. So it's all important, because that plays into the next part of the recommendation letters, where your teachers are going to be saying how extraordinary you are. And when they know that you're involved in lots of other activities, they can weave that into the fabric of their letters. As they talk about how great you are in the class, they'll say that, you're also very involved in X, Y, and Z activities. We always have a handful of students who are in scouting, which is unusual. People generally don't stick around for the higher levels of scouting in high school. But again, it's very extraordinary. And that comes with a lot of expectation that you're doing service in the community, because that's the basis of those programs. So these are the kind of things that everyone is looking for in a student, looking for character references, things like that. So all of this comes together, like I said, to paint a picture of who you are, how you have spent your time, and what's important to you, and what they can expect that you will do for them when you come to their school. Because it's all about, not only the academics, but of course, service and character is a very important part of the whole higher education. Next slide, please. Okay. So, as I said, many wonderful schools, not always a fit for everyone. So you really have to think about some things that are just important in general. So the fact that a school is fully accredited is very important. Most schools are, but you need to be mindful because not all of them are. And if they're not accredited, then you can get a degree that's not going to be valid. So that's really important to pay attention to. It's also important, to a degree, what types of degrees are offered at a school. If they're just offering bachelor degrees, that's one thing. But if they have bachelor's, master's, PhDs, BSMDs, BSJDs, all these types of degree programs, it just shows to you that there's a different degree of rigor to that particular school, that they are serious about their education, and you're not just going to get a bachelor's degree, but you have the opportunity to pursue all these other types of degrees if you wanted to, and it draws a certain kind of professor to that institution because they're teaching at such a high caliber. So all those kind of things are considerations. It doesn't mean that it has to be, but if that's important to you, if you think that you are going to go on for a higher degree, then you want to make sure that the school that you're looking at offers that, so that if you wanted to, you could just stay right where you are and go from bachelor's right on through your PhD if you wanted to. Okay. So another really important thing, we're from New York, right? So we're used to a certain kinds of lifestyle. And so for some people, they've had enough and they want to go, get me to a rural mountaintop. I'm tired of being in the city, and that's what I want. Other people, they love the city, and so they want to mimic. There's no copying really New York, but there are, smaller versions of New York all over the country. And so people look for those kind of settings. And some, prefer a more suburban kind of a setting. So it matters. It may sound silly, but if you're going to spend 4 years somewhere, you got to be happy where you are. So make sure that there's things that are going on. If you decide you want to, go to a school, let's just use Dartmouth as an example, fabulous school in between two mountains, no city. So are you okay with that? Would you be happy with that, wandering through the woods and all those kind of natural activities? Or do you want to have access to, something more? So these are the kind of things to think about, and the size of the student body. You have schools that the whole school is 1,000 students, and that's from the undergrad right through the 4 years. That's very tiny. That's smaller than us. And then there are schools that have 60 or 80,000 students. That's like a little city. So you have to think about what kind of personality do you have. Can you navigate a large environment like that successfully, where you could conceivably kind of get lost in the numbers? Do you want to go to a smaller school, a mid-sized school? There's all these things to think about. And there are benefits either way. But you have to decide for yourself, because what would work for me may not work for you. And what your parents have in mind may not necessarily align with what you have in mind. So communication, and this is another thing that I will talk about endlessly, communication with the college office is important, and communication with your family is important. Everybody needs to understand what you're thinking about. Otherwise, none of us can help you. So it's important to communicate. All right. So then you also have the public schools, the private schools, the ones that have religious affiliations, all these considerations. And again, it's a personal decision. So you'll have to think about where you see yourself and where you'll be comfortable. All right. So now we're at the point, so imagine that you have a list of schools and you're going to decide how you're going to apply. So you can do, and I know you probably know this because if you have senior friends or older siblings, you know all about this: early decision, restrictive early action, and regular decision. So it's no more just applying to school. It's like all these choices that you have. So the earlies, and I'm just going to lump them in together with the making it plural, are anywhere from, well, if you do Questbridge, that's September 26th generally. So that would be the first really early slew of applications. And that's a special program, which I don't know if we're going to be talking about that right now, but we will be talking about that as well. But then there will be like the regular college applications that start like October 15th is an early deadline. Then November 1st is the most traditional early deadline. And then there's November 15th, which is another early deadline. And if you're applying to schools in California, it's November 30th. That's just their deadline. So you have all these things to think about. And that requires the work that I'm talking about now. If you do the work of researching schools and ideas about what you want to study and all that kind of minutia of the process here, by the time you get to senior year, you know, well, I'm clearly going to do early decision to this school, and I'll do early action to 2 or 3 other schools, and you'll know that, and because you did all the research, so you're prepared for that. You're not scrambling in September trying to figure out, well, where am I? I know I have to apply early, which you don't have to apply early, but many people do. If you're going to apply early, you have to be prepared to, do the work. And you can only do that if you've done the research. So you're going to see that there's a common theme that I'm always coming back to. So early decision, one school only, and it's a binding agreement. There's been some shifts in that in the past year, where if there is a concrete reason why you cannot accept the offer, financial, distress or whatever it is, you can appeal and, be released from it if they find that it's a legitimate, concern. So I always encourage people to, when they think about early decision, think about it's a solid yes. I'm saying yes, I'm going, no matter what, I'm going. So if you have that in mind, then you're prepared for the possibility that they may not give you a full ride, because acceptance to a school is not the same as getting scholarship or any release from the cost. So you have to really go in with the idea that I might have to pay for this, and am I willing? And again, communicate that amongst your family members so that you can make a wise decision about this. It's very pricey, some of these schools, so you have to really take a look. So that's early decision, binding agreement. Restrictive early action is non-binding. So it's many of the Ivies go with this restrictive early action. They don't really need to bind you because they got plenty of people. So they know if not you, somebody else is going to come, and they're not concerned. However, they don't like the idea that you might be applying to every Ivy under the sun. And so they have changed from early decision for that primary reason I just said, and early action they've removed from their wheelhouse also, because they want to know that, I don't know, Stanford, for example, is the only Ivy you want to go to. You don't want to go to Stanford, maybe Princeton, maybe Yale, maybe Harvard, maybe. They don't want to know that. They want to know that only their school is the one. So they restrict you, and they say, okay, we're not going to bind you to this agreement, but we're going to restrict you. So you cannot apply to any other private institution under a binding agreement. And you can only apply early to state or city schools. So very restrictive. And, you know, the reason that they allow the idea of a state or a city school is that they understand that financially, you know, if you're paying $10,000 to go to a CUNY and they're charging $100,000, they really can't compete with that. So they respect that and they say, you can apply and you can, you know, do whatever you want to do. But with the restrictive early action, if you get an offer, we'll stick with Stanford for now. They say, yes, we would like you to come, and they give you your financial package. If that financial package is not what you need in order to say yes, you can say no, thank you. Or you can say, I'd love to come. Is there anything we could do about this? So that's something that you can have a conversation about within restricted early action, which I neglected to say in early decision, you took that off the table, because although you can get out of the decision by saying, I can't afford it, you can't negotiate. Well, you can't use the word negotiate either. They get mad about that. You can't have a conversation with them about more money. They'll just release you if it's, you know, not an equitable situation. So, but with restrictive early action and early action, you can, once you get your financial package, contact the financial aid office of the school and say, listen, it's my dream. I'm making this up. You could say however you wanted to. It's my dream to attend your institution, but financially, it's just, you know, it's beyond my means. Is there anything that can be done? And often, if they've already made you an offer, there's a good chance that they may work with you a little bit. Maybe not as much as you had hoped, but they may improve it enough that you can say yes. And you don't have to make a decision on restrictive early action or early action until the May 1st deadline. Whereas with the early decision, you're already given them money to hold your seat come January. So that's that. And of course, regular decision, which nowadays in our schools, so few people do. I don't even know if people understand that there is such a thing as regular decision. Those start coming to be like early January. Some of them they have what they call rolling decision, and they just keep going until they fill their class. So that could mean they roll right through April, May, June, July, who knows, until their class is full. And that's considered a regular decision. So things to think about. This is why you need a full year to think about this stuff. And so another thing, as far as to see if you're a fit, is to consider what are the ranges. Every college will have on their website the ranges of like the students they accepted the prior year. So the average student, had this GPA and this SAT and that kind of a thing. So it's helpful to see whether or not you're a fit for the school. Do you have the grades that they expect, for their typical student to have? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is the biggie, because there's a difference between tuition and the cost of attending. So tuition is only like the academic piece. Cost of attending is everything else. So it's the tuition, the room and board. If you're going to stay there, you're going to have a meal plan. There's all kinds of choices with that. There's sometimes different fees, lab fees, student activity fees, books, It's a little different now because a lot of the books can be electronic. And so there's not the same heavy cost. But I'm sure there are going to be books that have to still be bought depending on the class that you take. And then, of course, you have to get there and come back. back and forth. So if you're going, for example, to California, that's a big trip. And maybe the first time you might drive, make it a nice, family vacation to drive out over the summer. But that's not going to be how you come back and forth. It's going to be most likely plane is the quickest way. And train is not really much cheaper than an airplane flight. So you're probably going to be flying back and forth. So it has to be included in the cost. If you go to school in Philadelphia, it's an hour and a half by car or train or bus. And you could come back and forth easy. If you wanted to come home for a weekend, you could do that as long as the parents were okay with you coming home. But from California, you're not coming home for the weekends. You're probably going to limit it to the big holidays and summer. And some of our students who have gone out to California end up staying. They get an apartment off campus and they just stay rather than come back and forth over the summer. And they can work and they can do internships and all kinds of things. So communication, you have to talk about this. You have to think about it. You have to be realistic. And it's not, say a school is, I'll try to be kind and say it's $80,000 a year for some of these higher tier schools, which is probably not even true, but we'll say it's 80. And then you add these other travel expenses to it, exponentially, and then you multiply that by 4. That's a lot of money. So it's not something to be done, cavalier. You have to be really mindful and communicate about what's realistic here. Because if it's not realistic, then, it's just going to be a source of stress for everyone. So it's important to consider the entire course of attending. And I didn't even include in here for the first year, unless you had a sibling who already went off to college and they still have their, stuff that they bought, you have to fill a dorm room with, whatever you need, a little refrigerator, and all the, the bedding and the pillows and the whatever it is that you're going to bring with you to get your room. They give you it's a bare room. How you filling it up? So it's another expense. So lots of things to think about. So then we come to the part that, is important, and that's the types of financial aid. And you have to look at each individual college because they have different ways of doing things. So I was speaking with the representative from Notre Dame this year, and she said that they have a policy, a loan-free policy at their school. Now, Notre Dame is a very difficult school to get into, but if you did get into it, then you would not be paying to attend. They have very wonderful benefactors who give them the opportunity to allow people to just, if you qualify, you come. And interestingly enough, she said that many people insist on paying anyway for all nature of reasons. But so you'll find that some institutions have situations like that where they meet full demonstrated need, perhaps, or this whole loan free to me is brand new information. And then there's merit-based. Merit-based is probably the smallest of all this stuff, the financial aid, because, that's highly competitive, and, maybe some small percentage of the top 1% that is accepted to the school are going to get merit-based aid, but that does exist. And so you have to be knowledgeable of what does the school offer. Do you have to apply for it separately? Is everyone considered? Again, there's no consistency. This is, an open market here. So lots of research has to be done. And then you want to know, Are you going to be taught? So you're spending $80,000, for example. Would you not like to have a full professor with a nice PhD at the end of their name teaching you, as opposed to a graduate student who is working their way through their graduate work by teaching? So these are the kind of things that you have to pay attention to. And that's also information that you can easily get. Well, not easily, you might have to dig around a little bit, but you'll be able to see what kind of, what's the ratio of the professors to students, and class sizes, all that kind of thing, and who is actually teaching you. And then you want to find out, because you're not going to be just in class for 4 years, you're going to want to do things. So you want to know what kind of organizations they have on campus. What are the facilities like? Everyone always wants to know what the food is like. And I always say, if you go on a visit to a college, you should go to the cafeteria and have lunch. See what the food is like, because again, you're going to be there for 4 years, and every meal, that's where it's going to be. So at least until you decide to leave campus and cook your own meals. But these are the kind of things. Do they have any Greek life, if you're interested in that? If they have intramural sports, because if maybe you're playing sports now, but you don't really want to go to school on a sports scholarship, because that's very difficult to do, to play and go to school at the same time. But they have intramural activities, and it's just all these things to keep you busy, and you have to have fun. Otherwise, you won't be able to keep this going. Okay, and you also want to know how many people graduate in 4 years. Do people come back? Do people come there freshman year and then transfer out? These are the kind of things. What's the retention rate? Sometimes they'll tell you, we have 95% graduation within 5 years, which is actually quite excellent. But there'll be other schools that it's way lower than that. So you need to know, because that'll give you an idea of the caliber of the student who's attending that school. Either that they're, not really serious about it, or they weren't prepared to go there and do that kind of high level work. So again, all part of your research. You're going to be very busy this year researching all this. So very, very big in the college world now is this career advisement and placement. So some schools are well known for having, great placement. And it's escaping me now that there's one of the Philly schools. It's going to come to me in the middle of the night. But you can continue to go back to them. It might be Drexel. You can continue even after you graduate college. You can go back and say, listen, I'm changing my career. I need some help. And they will sit with you in their career planning office and help you brainstorm what your next step should be. So those are kind of super valuable tools to have as you're going along. And if you're going to be in sports, if you're going to go and play, then you want to know what division they are, if they're 1, 2, or 3. Also interesting if you don't want to play, but you have the team spirit and you want to know the caliber of the school sports teams, so you can go to the games and stuff. It's interesting. This is going to be your life for 4 years. So there's lots of things that you're going to be doing that right now you're thinking to yourself, perhaps, I just want to go to college and get a degree. But all of this, it's a whole package. You're not just going to sit in your room and do nothing. So, and we want you to do healthy things. We don't want you to get sidetracked. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so college fairs all over the place. You have the Big Apple fairs that go borough to borough, and you have the Javits Center, which is, huge. It's just huge. They will usually a couple of weeks before their events in the spring, they will let you know who's coming. Just so for the most part, people look for the Ivies to be there, and they're not. There's no incentive for them, or need, really, not incentive, no need for them to go out and promote themselves, because those are the schools that everybody knows. And when you ask a student where they want to go, those are the schools that are going to slip off their tongue easily. So they do not go to these college fairs. But as I said, there are so many schools in the country that it's really it's worth going, just to get an idea of the scope, because we only know what's around us. We live in the Northeast. This is what we know. And actually, probably 5 hours out from us in any given direction, that's what we know. And if we lived in, Michigan, it would be the same thing. We would know what was around us. So these fairs, it's a way to get a little bit more information about schools all over the country. So it's very, very interesting. Can be overwhelming, but it's a family trip. Go to these things, see what's going on. We have a college fair in-house, and between 70 and 80 colleges come. And it's really a great opportunity. And it's interesting for me to see that the reps, even though they change, they're not always the same. But those that are around for a while, they are so good. They'll talk to a student at our college fair, and then come back in the fall when we have the smaller information meetings for the seniors to chat with the reps, and they'll remember talking to the student and say, "Oh, I talked to her. She has some really good questions." And I'm like, "You remember? How many students do you talk to?" And they just have that ability to really remember. And one of our students a couple of years ago, we had a rep from the from California. I can't remember the school it was, but he came to Staten Island Tech. He lived in Brooklyn originally, and he had an opportunity, so he came and did a visit to our school. And so this group of students spoke with him, and this young lady ended up doing a summer program out in California. And when she came back, she said, "Oh, I was walking across the campus and I saw the rep." I said, "Did you go speak to him?" And she said, "No, I was embarrassed." And I'm like, "Oh, it's a missed opportunity." When even if you don't think somebody's going to remember you, like that, you meet a rep and you're talking to them and getting information, asking questions. It's so important to ask questions. But if you happen to run into them, then just reintroduce yourself. It's really, they're the ones who are going to be reading your applications. So if they say, "Oh, I met this student at Staten Island Tech, and then they were on campus and they came right over and they made such an impression on me," and it's just part of now the knowledge base of who you are. It kind of lifts you off the paper and makes you real for them. So asking questions is so valuable. And, we always supply students with a list of, 20 or 30 questions, and you can certainly come up with your own as well. But to make sure that you ask a question, whatever it may be that's on your mind, because that's how you understand what they have to offer. They get to know a little bit more about you, and it impresses them. And they're always telling me, the intelligent questions, and that's because we gave you the questions, but you all have really interesting things to ask about. And so that impresses them, because they go to many schools and nobody says anything. They just stare at them until they're finished, and then they walk away. So the fact that our students are so interactive really leaves a positive impression. So anyway, you can look forward to that in the spring for us, and all the fairs will be during Ours is going to be March 26th, and I don't know if the Big Apple's been announced yet, but I saw tonight that in April, early April, is going to be at the Javits Center. So all that kind of stuff is well advertised. So if you're interested, you can do that. Okay. So I already talked right through the end of my slide here. So we'll go on to the next slide. Okay. So again, this is now repetitive, just, kind of putting it all in one place. So this is, it's really important to keep it all straight. So I guess what I will say about the especially the early decisions, and there's an ED2 that is up and coming. It started a few years back where they would, I think it was NYU, honestly. It seems like they're the ones that kind of started the ball rolling. And they would say to a regular decision student, oh, I see you're applying regular decision. Would you like to change that to an ED2? Which is also binding. But the deadline is January. So for all the schools. And I was actually just reading something tonight about Johns Hopkins, who also now has an ED2. And they were explaining that the only difference between the ED1 and the ED2 for them was that the ED2 students had more time to be thoughtfully put their application together. So whatever that means. I would hope you're always doing it thoughtfully, but at any rate, it's also binding though. So to keep in mind about the, that decisive, yes, I'm going here kind of a thing. But what I was starting to say is that these early January deadlines for a regular decision or for the ED2s are probably going to be done by you over the break. So that means we're on break too. So we're not going to do anything with that. You can do your application. And I'm trying to tell you now, so maybe you remember for next year, and keep it in mind that if you want your application to be processed in time, then you have to do it before we leave, because every time you're on vacation, so are we. And nobody's going onto the portal and, making sure, did little Johnny or Sally do any applications while we were on break? No, that's not how it goes. So if you want to have those things processed, it has to be done the week before we leave, which isn't a bad thing, because then you have the whole break to relax, which is what you should be doing. But anyway, tuck that in the back of your head for next year, because that's going to be, it comes up every year. Okay, so the early actions, non-binding. I will say that the early decisions, some of the schools take a solid 50, 60% of their incoming class from that early decision pool, which is a large chunk, which is why many people do it. But you have to qualify. So just applying does not get you anything. You have to understand that the school is a fit for you and you're a fit for the school. Because otherwise, again, back to the time, the precious time that it takes to do these applications, you want to make sure that it's going to be fruitful. You don't want to just willy-nilly fill out applications. So anyway, so those are binding. The early actions, non-binding. And the other thing I will say about too many early actions, because that's another piece of the puzzle that people will do sometimes up to like 8 to 10 early actions. And it's excessive. It's excessive, and it's not humanly possible to do a really thoughtful application for 8 schools all before November 1st. It's just not going to be. Something somewhere along the line, either the applications are going to start getting a little sloppy, or your classwork is going to get a little sloppy, which is not good. This year and last year, we had more requests for progress reports than I can remember. And that means that the schools it's usually the early decision schools will say, I want a snapshot of where our student is right now. So that's why we have a November report card, so that I have something to send when they request. But it used to be a handful of schools. Now I just sent, 2 more out this week. And to me, it's already a little bit late because they're revealing their early decisions tomorrow, early next week. So it's tight. But many, many more schools requesting this. So you have to find the balance. So if you do an early decision and then you do 2 or 3 early actions, it's enough. And then everything else can be regular decision. And if you do all the research I'm suggesting you do between now and September, you will have a well thought out list that makes sense, not a panic list where, oh, my friend is applying here. Why didn't I think of that school? I better do it too. And before you know it, you're applying to schools you don't even know if you want to go to. So please be really thoughtful in taking the time to make these lists and really do the research. If it's at all possible, I always encourage people to go physically and visit. It's a nice thing to do as a family. I love doing it with my own children. Just taking a weekends and going and visit, 2 or 3 schools in an area. It's a different feel to put your feet on a campus than to read about it or even look online. And they have virtual tours, and that's very good. But feet on the campus, talking to people, eating the food, all of that is very helpful. So part of the process. Okay, so you're going to take a little snapshot in your brain about this, different ways of applying, keep it all straight so that you understand the deadlines, and you apply accordingly. And we didn't even touch on, or maybe we'll in another slide, I don't remember. If you're doing like a Sophie Davis kind of a thing, that's a December 30th. So there's different programs that have different deadlines. So you have to be really careful. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the majority of the schools that you apply to are going to be on the Common Application. And the Common Application and Naviance are paired. So it's the easiest way to apply, because once you fill out your Common Application and you add your colleges to it, then we can, with the press of a button, add your transcript, your courses in progress, your recommendations, all this stuff. Easy. But then you have schools like MIT and Georgetown and University of Chicago who say, oh no, you will apply directly through our portal because that's what we want you to do. And that's called school specific, and it is very specific. So you have to make sure that you fill out that application correctly. You input the email address for the counselor. Generally, it's me, unless you are close with your guidance counselor and you prefer them to do it for you, to write the letter and take care of the reports and stuff. Otherwise, it's something that is my purview. And they will send me a link, and they will send your teachers a link, and all the documentation gets sent that way directly to the school. So, of course, We like in the college office the common application process because it's easy and it's clear and it's easy for us to track because we have access to all that. Once the school specifics go out, we have no way of tracking them. So, of course, the college will be in communication with you, but you have to check your portal. There's a lot of responsibility on your end. So, you can fit 20 schools on the Common App. So, that's a lot of schools. That's really too many schools, but it's a lot. And believe it or not, there will be peers, look around, who will apply to more than 20 schools. And so then they will go off to more than likely the coalition, or no one so far has used the universal application because it only applies to a small group of schools. The coalition's a little messy. It's been difficult on my end to get them the documents they keep telling me that they want. So it's not easy. And it's separate from the Naviance. You can't use the Naviance. Coalition is a version of different version of Common App that's not affiliated. They use what's called SCOIR, SCOIR, or Slate to get their documents. So it's a little messy, and with everyone applying to a lot of schools, it becomes a burden, honestly, to try to keep up with all this. So my strong suggestion is that 20 schools is really plenty. It's really plenty. And CUNY schools are done separately, so they're not taking up space on your Common App. And if you had to apply to the SUNY schools, you could do it through their portal. It's more accessible for us. So there are ways around it, but just be let's have some thoughtful conversations about the wiseness of going over 20 applications. It's a lot of work, and it's not really showing that you have a commitment anywhere. So it's important to look at it a little deeper at that. Okay. And I forgot California, of course, has their own way of doing things. But they don't really ask us for anything. They don't want teacher recommendations or counselor recommendations. You self-report your transcript. We send them stuff later, but initially they don't want anything from us, really. So anyway. All right. I think, I'm sure that there will be more questions. Are there any questions now, as a matter of fact? I never see them come up, so. Okay. All right, so if you haven't done extracurriculars, but you have done school activities, depends on what you mean by school activities. Do you mean like you participate in sing or perform in the multicultural show, or what exactly school activities means? I'm not sure what you mean by that. And outside volunteering and open house. So open house is in-house volunteering. And although it's super helpful for us, and I would never discourage you from doing it, if that's all that you're doing, then it's not going to be impressive to anyone outside of the school, because they're looking to see how you're helping literally the community in some kind of a way. But I'm not clear what you mean by school activities. Yeah, so those are all wonderful things, but when you're talking about extracurricular activities, they're looking for something more substantive than that. Okay. All right. Next slide, please. Okay. So the scholarship is ongoing. I can't even tell you how many scholarships come across my desk that go out to students if they apply. Um, you know, there's no way to really know if they're applying or not. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of scholarships. I just had a parent, um, maybe it was yesterday, I guess, who was asking about the Calvin Coolidge scholarship, which is only for juniors, and it's a little bit of a complicated um, scholarship, but if you're accepted, then they pay for 4 years at any institution in the United States. So it's pretty wonderful. But it's very specific. You have to write essays about Calvin Coolidge, and it's very specific. But anyway, so it starts, immediately. It's started already. And as far as the grants go, grants have to do with either the school itself or through FAFSA and that's, something that we'll get to next year that gets done, or if you have older children, already that have gone to college, that the FAFSA gets done every year. I was just in a meeting today, and they were saying that the state, I don't know if it's the state or federal government, has made the FAFSA, they're calling it the universal FAFSA. So everybody, no matter if you're going to college, you're not going to college, or you don't think you're going to get any money or not, everyone is filling out the FAFSA. And there's some kind of waiver form if you are not going to go to college that you have to fill out. So some kind of connection will be made through the FAFSA to every single student, which is interesting. All right, so in junior year, if you have not gotten into any, you don't belong to any clubs or, we have game development, we have music production, we have origami, we have all nature of soap. There's a soap making club. There are clubs that do, the Key Club, and Rotary is strictly a service-oriented kind of a club that get you involved. So I hesitate to say what you should do, because if you're doing it just to fill in the blanks on a resume, then you're not gonna be doing it with your full energies, and how is it really going to be helpful to you? So I think it's something maybe better to have a conversation one-on-one than to, me to just give you some pat answer on I can't even say this is Zoom, whatever this is, YouTube or whatever. But if you want to, make an appointment to come in, then we could talk about it. Okay. All right. So, and I already kind of touched on this with Coalition app. Okay. So again, it's just it's an alternative to the Common App. Common App is, again, most commonly used across the country, and this, again, it's a free market. So now this coalition has been going on for a while, and it's an alternative, not one, as you heard me share already, that I'm particularly enamored with, only because it's not real user friendly. Anyway, so all right, so this is kind of repetitive, this particular slide. It's talking about the schools that do not use the Common App or the coalition. and you would be applying directly to them. All right, so I think we can go on to the next slide. Okay, so these are super important as well. FAFSA again. Now this year, the FAFSA was not available October 1st. Last year, if anyone had a senior or had a friend who was going through that, it was terrible. It was very, very messy. There was a lot of glitches. They redid the FAFSA, supposed to be simplified. It was a mess. It's better so far, but it's still a little not great, but it's much better. And I do believe that, well, it definitely wasn't October 1st, but it was earlier than anticipated. So in November, it definitely opened up for everyone to start applying. And I had sent out an email. You guys should all be attached to the college classroom for your grade level, and you've been there since you're a freshman, which you may or may not have realized at that point. But a lot of information gets relayed that way. And so the information about the FAFSA definitely went out that way, that they had it in a test phase for October, and then sometime in November, they said, oh, by the way, if you want, you can tell your students to start applying. So I'm not sure if next year it'll be a solid October 1st, but that was the way it was, in an effort to align with the CSS and to just get the process going a little bit earlier. It used to be January, and that was okay too, but it was just different. So anyway, we'll see what it is for next year. Hopefully it's back to October 1st. And it's a free application, hence the name. And there is some knockoff kind of websites that will say, oh, we'll help you fill out the FAFSA, just give us $25. There's no fee attached to the FAFSA. You fill it out, there's no cost. It has to be done every year. It's a new process where they will take there's a link on the FAFSA that says you have to agree to have your tax returns taken directly from the IRS. So you're not literally submitting your tax forms anymore. You're putting in your information, your Social Security and that kind of thing, and they will grab the tax forms right off of the IRS website. And, so there's no confusion about, oh, I thought I did this and I didn't, and all this. They have everything that they need at their fingertips. So if there's any complications, of course, then there's something, they will let you know that you have to submit maybe something in addition. But for the most part, if everything is not complicated, then it is a much simpler process. There's still some glitches with if the student signs the application before the parents, or the parent signs the application before the student, sometimes it throws the application into a place where it's saying that it's incomplete. So they have a lot of resources available on the website, and you can get help. Students come into the office all the time and ask me questions, and I help them as best that I can navigate through it. So I'm hoping by next year it's better, and it's always they call it the prior. So in 2025, you're going to be looking at 2023. So you're going to go back 2 years. So, and that's all. That's for a future conversation. I don't want to give you too much all at one time. So that's every year while you're in college FAFSA is the name of the game. CSS Profile is not for everyone, but for many, 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 many private schools, they require both the FAFSA and the CSS Profile. So what's good about that right now, because FAFSA is, messy, is that colleges are making their initial financial offerings based only on the CSS Profile if the FAFSA is not done, which is helpful. And that was something they learned last year, that we better do something, or, nobody can make a decision about where they want to go to school if you don't know how much money you're going to be offered. So, and then if the FAFSA is dramatically different, then they make the adjustment after the fact. So you have to know, is your school that you're applying to going to require the CSS Profile? And as I said, many private schools do ask for it, but not all. So you have to, again, in your research, make sure whether or not you need to fill out that CSS Profile. And that's goes through the College Board. And there is a fee attached to that. I'd say, I think it's $15. Well, right now it is anyway, for every profile that you send out. You have to tell them what schools you want it to go to, that kind of a thing. And there are fee waivers that, if you qualify, that you can get on their College Board website. That also gets done every year. Now, if you live in New York, it's strongly suggested that you fill out the TAP. Once you finish the FAFSA, at this meeting today, they also said it's important for the student to sign last, because then it's going to prompt them as soon as they sign and the application is complete, it'll prompt them to go right to the TAP. Please fill out your TAP. And you might say, oh, I'm not going to go to school in New York. But you know what? You might. And it's important just to fill it out, because if you end up, things change and you end up going to school in New York and you haven't done the TAP, it's going to be, too late. And that, there is money that's available that is not, it's grant money. So it doesn't get paid back. You just say, thank you very much, and you move on. So it's worthwhile. And the other piece of it, so you have to, if you don't go to school in New York, then it's null and void. So they just don't give it to you. But if you do go to school in New York, then you get it. So in order to complete the application, it's going to make you put in a school. Now, it doesn't have to be, it should be a school you're applying to, so in case it is the one you go to. But it has to be a school in New York. And if you end up not going to that school, then, if you decide to change schools, then you just go back in your application, your TAP application, and you change the school. That's all. It's not a big deal. But if you don't fill it out at all, you can't do that. So anything that you get from TAP does not have to be repaid. Okay. And again, that's part of it's connected to the FAFSA. So it's something that you would do every year. All right. Next slide. Okay. So just capturing the whole essence of what I've been talking about. This is what you need to do this year. And get yourself, if you're a planner and you can look at a calendar, start plotting out what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, because you have to research your colleges. If there's any special programs you're interested in, if you want a PA program, if you want a accelerated medical program, whatever it is that you might be, specialized kind of programs that you're interested in, you have to know about that. So start doing your research for colleges and programs. And then, as I said in the very beginning, get a list of those, 10 to 12 schools that you are serious about applying to. Understands what the requirements are. The testing is still, um, you know, some schools are extending the testing, the test optional. And as I always remind students, MIT was test optional for about a month during the pandemic, and they went right back to it. So they have really never not required it. And some of the Ivies are sliding back that way again as just another data point to kind of give them more information for, who to take and who to not. But it's not across the board. And there are some schools who, way before the pandemic, were test optional or test free. California is test free. So you need to know that about whatever school you're applying to. Again, there's no uniformity. Everything is unique to a state or a particular school. It's really a lot of work to figure it all out. And then again, consider whether you're going to do anything early. And if you are going to do early, understand you cannot do early decision and restrictive early action at the same time. You do one or the other. You could do restrictive early action and ED2, because that ED2 will come after the results for the restrictive early action. So that won't interfere. But you can't do early decision 1 and restrictive early action at the same time. All right, so you're going to decide if you're going to do any of that and what that means for you, and kind of plot out what that would look like. When would you have to have all your ducks in a row, as they say. If you're going to, I hope that everyone waits until spring of junior year to start with this testing. If you're going to take the test, please wait. It's early to start testing, and all the scores go onto a score report. So if you take multiple tests in an effort to do well, which makes sense, there's only so many times you can do that. And for now, it seems like 3 is what most colleges will accept as normal. More than that, they don't know what to do with that, because it looks like you're just trying to get a better score. And if the scores haven't improved after the second or third time, odds are very strong they're not going to improve. So there comes a point where you just have to accept that you're at the points, the highest point you're going to get to. So if you wait till the spring, 2 things. 1, you will have learned that much more in your regular classes, from the beginning of junior year to spring of junior year is like a lifetime in emotional and academic development. So just organically, you're going to be better prepared. And you'll have more time if you did want to, prep yourself. You don't have to go for a paid prep, but you could, you can go through a few SATs and see how they go and get used to the flow, especially with this, digital. It's a little different. Some people love it. Some people are still adjusting to it. But, don't go crazy taking, over and over and over again. Okay? And you can take, if you wanted to take one in the spring, then you could wait, until the summer to take a second one. And if you're really still unhappy, then if you took an October SAT, it would get where it had to go and plenty of time for any early applications that you might do. So you have plenty of time for testing. You don't have to start it now. Maintain your academic excellence all the way through to June 30th of senior year. It's not, once I get accepted, I'm done. No. all the way to the ends. We send out mid-years in February, and we send out final transcripts in June. And long after you are gone, you graduated, you had your party, we're at school sending transcripts out. So if your grades drop dramatically from where they accepted you, say you had, a 97 when they accepted you, and then you fell asleep in spring of senior year because you didn't need any of those classes to graduate, you're good. And now all of a sudden you have an 85. So that's pretty dramatic. You can have your scholarships rescinded. You can have your application rescinded. You can be put on academic probation. All kinds of not great ways to start college can happen. So all the way until you're not done until you're done. So please keep that in mind. And I think we're almost at the end here. Is there one more slide? Okay, so let's stay with the positives. We're not positive yet. All right. So keep your eyes open for programs that are coming out. Have a summer activity in place. Oh, see, I didn't do my work. Have a summer activity in place no later than spring of 2025. So if you want to, I don't know if any of you have an interest in the study abroad. So I'm not going to get into the super scoring now because it's very difficult to super score regular SAT, paper SAT, and digital, and they haven't had enough digitals to really know what's going on yet. So, all right. So we have an affiliation with an organization called CIEE, and it's a cultural exchange with countries all over the world. And you can earn college credit. You can either learn a language, you can study sustainability or biodiversity or finance or whatever it is you might want to study. And it's really a wonderful addition to your application. All kinds of summer programs at colleges, pre-college programs, enrichment programs, all kinds of things going on. So put something in play so that you have that as like your final add-on to your resume as you're going to apply to college. This is what I did this summer before I started senior year. So many of you probably through maybe work-based learning have already put together a resume. College resume is a little different than a work resume, but it's a good starting point, and start getting yourself prepared for the eventuality of perhaps an interview with the college where you're going to bring with you a copy of your transcript and a copy of your resume, and if they ask for it, you have it. So you want it to be professional, and they're, as I prepare you to come and see me in the spring, I will give you a template for what the college office would like your resume to look like for the purposes of college. Okay. So keep your eyes open for college fairs, open houses, visits. There's things that I am going to have on the college classroom for you. And in May, you're going to start asking your teachers for letters of recommendation. We always suggest 2 teachers. One will be from a STEM teacher, one will be from a humanities teacher, so that you have, kind of an equal picture of the type of student you are, that you have very diverse abilities. So some colleges don't want any, a lot of schools down in Florida don't want teacher recommendations. California, as I said, many of their schools don't want them. They just really want the student information, and they want to look at your work. All right, so May is when you're going to start asking teachers, and you're going to ask them in person, and you're going to give them some respect, and you're going to ask from your junior year, because that's the closest. If you go back to freshman year, it's a lifetime away from by the time you're applying to college. So you want a junior year teacher, because that is right before you're applying, and that will give the best idea of the type of student you are today. So I know that we give you a email address, a student one through the city. So it's not going to work for college, because as soon as you graduate from high school, that email is purged. So come up with a professional email address that you want to dedicate just to your college applications and information, everything to do with college. Don't have it something that you have personal things going to, or it has to be dedicated just to college. And that way, you're not going to miss any important information. You're going to always be checking that particular email for any information related to college. Okay? And now I think we're at the final slide.
Okay, so that's it.
That's it? Yep. You cut me off? Okay. Best of luck. Thank you.